Hello, Aurora School. Now, Aurora is starting a special project for us. What we have been working on is looking at the new K to 4 curriculum that came out a couple of years ago, and looking at the draft K to 6 that's out there now, and what we're expecting in the spring for an updated draft. And one of the things in there is there's a lot of outcomes around Indigenous learning, First Nation, Métis, and Inuit learning. And we wanted to find a way to help start supporting that, knowing that this is coming for us. We put a bunch of books into schools a couple of years ago. We got the Under the One Sun guided reading kits. And this is kind of the next step of that, is we try and look at how do we resource some of that. And we will make sure we tie those books directly when the new curriculum draft comes out, so you know what book works with what outcome. But this is the other piece that we are putting in place in elementary schools and middle schools. But we wanted to try it somewhere first to get some feedback. It's called the land-based learning cart. So it looks like this. You got a gray cart. It's full of stuff. In fact, it is very full of stuff. When you look at it from the top, there's all sorts of stuff in there. And we'll get to the stuff in a second. But let's talk about what land-based learning is. So land-based learning, it incorporates the idea of getting outside with students and learning about the land, learning from the land, and learning outdoors. But it puts a lens of looking and learning from the land. So there's a definition here. I am going to read it out, but I just want you to have some time with it to internalize what this means. This was developed in consultation with Cheryl Devon, who is a Métis educator. She was part of the Walking Together group. She is the Indigenous education coach out of Elk Island Public Schools. And she was really helpful with this as part of the project, as well as a couple of educators from Edmonton Public Schools. So just so you know where this is coming from. And we put this together. So land-based learning recognizes the deep connection and relationship of Indigenous peoples to land and place. It is grounded in Indigenous knowledge and pedagogy for the benefit of all. Students spend time outside setting goals, exploring strategies, and curricular outcomes to learn from the land. And I really want to highlight this piece. This is all about outside. And really tied to curriculum. We don't want this to be an add-on. We just want it as a pedagogical approach to meet some of these new outcomes. And I think it would fit a lot with some of your current outcomes. Land-based learning enhances traditional and cultural values, such as kinship, identity, language, and ceremonies. By exploring their relationship with the land and community, students make their own meaning and create their own stories. So this is a pedagogical approach. So it's not, we're not trying to say that by doing this, we are learning about First Nation, Métis, and Inuit culture per se, but we're trying to learn the appreciation for land and try and use the land as a lens to do some of these things. So put together this, let's get that out of the way. So some shifts that you need to consider are here. And a lot of this is some different pieces, so it's going to be building some background knowledge for us. I'm really a learner coming to this. This is a new way of thinking for me. I was actually a forest school instructor in Scotland, so that lens of taking kids outside, absolutely, but adding this other piece of the land, actually as a teacher, the land as a text, and learning to learn from the land and learn with the land. It's kind of exciting, actually. It adds one more layer of appreciation. So just wanted to bring your attention to this document. I'll make sure to include it in the links that I send with the video. I think I should make that bold. Pardon me. So some shifts in the orange box. So here's kind of how this is different. The yellow box is how to just some of those pieces of planning and how to pull it into your instruction. This blue box I really love. So these are the verbs. These are the actions that we should have kids doing. And a lot of these things we already do in our classrooms. But it's nice to bring that action to this because this is very much an active pedagogical approach. And here's what we would love to see out of the students. And notice this isn't learning about First Nation people. This is learning about some of those values. So learning about respect, seeing how we can learn from the land. the conservation side, those interconnected pieces. And these are where some of those outcomes are really hitting that we'll see in the new curriculum. But I think there's a lot of this right now. And the patterns in nature, for example, there's a wonderful connection to the current math. When we look at cyclical pieces and looking at seasons, I think there's a lot we can do there. So just adding another lens and layer onto what we're doing here. So the purple box here, learning from the land, multidisciplinary approach. Get outside. You have a wonderful school ground at Aurora for this as well. And it can be on your own school ground. It could also be on the context of a field trip and going somewhere else. All right. And the assessment side of this, I intentionally left it for last. But there is this wonderful piece here called Bookmark prompts. And this file has some activity pieces, but also some ways of collecting and thinking about thinking with the students. So these are some of the ones that we definitely worked with the Indigenous educator Cheryl on. She really helped bring out some of these. So open it in its own window here, observing a living creature, noticing the sun, observing plants. Now these letters here, FDT, some of these it's to have they acquired some of that foundational learning, some of that respect, some of that appreciation. The D questions get to a deeper understanding of things. And T is that transfer piece and that learning piece that they really get to another place. So it's kind of exciting. So just so make sure you look at that. This is actually printed out and in the cart, but it might be another one you want to print out for yourself if you're taking kids outside and saying, okay, let's do something with the tree today. If you're looking at the living creature, the creepy crawly creature unit is what I used to call it, but there's some really interesting things you could do there. So lots of different things you could tie this in. So some of the key documents just to help you kind of wrap your head around this. Now, what's actually in the cart? So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here, but there is a section in the cart that has like a magazine holder and it's full of books. So this one is one of the books in there is called Dirty Teaching. Is actually one that I picked up in Scotland. She's a Scottish educator. So this doesn't have the Indigenous lens on it, but what it has is a whole bunch of ways to learn outside and get kids outside and just a ton of ideas. It's aimed at K-4, actually K-5, because that's their primary designation in the UK. So it's really wonderful just for teaching ideas to learn outside. And then you can add that lens of conservation, respect, the cyclical piece of land, the pattern piece, and some of those land-based principles can be added on top of this, but this is the curriculum piece underneath. She also wrote this one, Messy Maths, and it's all about how we can learn math outside, which is really, really fun, and it's all aimed at that really early elementary age. There's lots of stuff in here. I taught kindergarten over there and used a ton of this with my kindergarten kids. We were outside more than we were inside, which was kind of fun. We all had wellies, though. This one adds the more Indigenous lens. So this is called a walking curriculum. And it's the idea of how do we develop that sense of wonder and that sense of place when we're outside. And so this is a really nice one. It's aimed at K-12, but I think there's lots of application here in the early years. So this is kind of that, how can I use the land and spending time outside to help students develop that sense of land and place. So it's developed around ecological education and puts that Indigenous lens a little bit on it. And then there's a couple of student-based resources in there. There's one called Everybody Needs a Rock and Trudy's Rock Story. And it's the idea of how do we connect with a rock or a piece of land. This Everyone Needs a Rock it's full of criteria about, and it's how do I find the right rock and the criteria for rock. So I love this one around learning about criteria. And it's about a little girl that finds a rock, which is really, really nice. The other ones that are in there is Spring Math Walk. So this is seasonal based, and it's looking at ideas in spring you can do around outside with math. Outside in winter, yay, because it's winter. And an autumn one, we're just on the edge of that one. But those are really nice because it's all about getting outside. So the cart is full of stuff to learn outside and play outside and learn through play and develop that sense of land and place. So it's got books in it, but then it's got all sorts of stuff in there. It's got sets of rulers. It's got foam mats. If I go back to the pictures, the idea is they're the interlocking floor tiles. Oh, where'd it go? They're there. So they can be locked together to build kind of a mat that everybody can be on, or everyone can have their own square. You can see clipboards, whiteboards. That bin there is full of whiteboard pens. There's petri dishes if we need to do some collection and some investigation. There's twine and clothespins. In the Dirty Teaching book, they talk a lot about sequencing activities and collecting things and pinning things up, and so there's a bunch of twine and there's a bunch of pins that you can use for lots of different activities in there. Protractors, partly just to trace circles or shapes, but also if you're starting to do that measuring of all sorts of things, and they're nice big ones so they can work with mittens. Hopefully, these are the feedback things. We got mechanical pencils, so they don't have to be sharpened. But there's magnifying glasses in there. There's some plasticine clay. There's some stuff in the Dirty Teaching book around finding something and to build an appreciation of it is build a model of it with clay. So use it, throw it in Ziploc bags, do your thing. There's a bunch of crayons in there, so you can do rubbings of things. But Aurora's doing this first. So what we need is we need some feedback. This doesn't work in here. You should add this. This was rubbish. Get better quality this. This was great. There's some hand trowels in there. If we need to do some digging in leaves to find stuff. So this is our first shot at this. We've learned a little bit from the Elk Island. They had one going last year. But we want some feedback. We'd love to know what works, what doesn't work, because what we learned from Aurora, we're going to put into place in all the other elementary schools. But you guys get to start. So what's a good resource? What's not a good resource? Or, it'd be better if there was more of this. We never use this. That's kind of stuff that I'd love to hear about, because we want to make it really good for everybody. So that's our goal. So land-based learning, the idea of learning outside, learning about land, learning from land, and building some of these skills in students. This one, student achievement and growth. Those are kind of the pieces that we want to put in there. So hopefully you can help us a little bit, Aurora, and help us build the best cart we can for every school.